In a simple statement, I would say that people are the point.
Sure.
So I am a very driven, ambitious leader. I like to get stuff done. I like to accomplish great things. And the young version of me thought that the goals and the mission and the achievements were the point. The realization was that the great gift of leadership is doing good work with people.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of A Higher Purpose, of Vanderbloemen podcast. I'm your host, Brett Connolly, and joining me, Sarah G. Gonzo Gonzalez.
Hey, it's me.
What's up? And we have Jenni Catron joining the pod today. She just wrote a new book, Culture Matters. I've read it. You've read it. It's a great book. Definitely recommend checking it out.
Yeah.
And she is leading the way with her company, Foresight. And so it's a pretty sweet episode, I'm not lying.
Yeah, you guys are really going to enjoy this conversation.
So let's go. Okay, Jenni, tell us a little bit about kind of your starting off point, your journey, and really the ministry and what you've built out today and moving into the future. Just tell us a little bit of that Spark Note version of your story, if you will.
Sure. Well, Sarah and Brett, thanks for having me. Love these conversations. And, today my journey looks a lot different than I probably expected, which I think happens to a lot of us as we get further into our careers. It's like, I didn't plan it quite this way, but I really like where I am, is what I can say.
Yeah.
I started out, I wanted to work in the record business in Nashville, Tennessee. So that was dream job for me. I got a internship and then a job at a company called Forefront Records way back in the mid 90s. And that sounds probably like a long time ago to a lot of you and our listeners. So I'm dating myself a bit, but it was like the heyday of Christian music. And so it was like dream job for me. So that's where I started. I spent almost a decade in the record business, which was absolutely a blast. I did branding and marketing development for a lot of the top Christian artists at the time and was absolutely loving it. Just living the dream job and thinking I'm going to be a CEO of a record company someday.
Wow.
And I went through a corporate merger there. So the first 8 years of my time at the record company were phenomenal. Great team, great experience. I'm learning, I'm growing, we're hitting our goals. I'm making some mistakes. I'm learning, I'm being coached, I'm being developed. Just all the really good ingredients of a great work experience. And then we went through a corporate merger. And overnight, my experience went from this amazing place that I loved to go every day to this awful environment that I dreaded getting up and going out the door and going to work. And I thought, I was just so disoriented by it. I was like, what just happened? Like, my job had not changed. My title or my responsibilities had not changed, but my leader and my team had changed. And it made all the difference, right?
Yeah.
The culture changed, and it was so distinct to me that was the first really memorable moment I have of the power of culture and the power of the environments we work in. So I wouldn't have put language to that. I just knew I didn't like where I was. And so I looked for the next opportunity. And that happened to be at the church that my husband and I were a part of planting. We were part of Crosspoint Church in Nashville, fast growing, really fantastic ministry. And I got invited to come on staff as executive director. And at first I was like, what am I going to do at a church? I'm a business leader. I'm going to be a CEO of a record company. I don't know what I'm going to do at a church.
Right.
But it became clear that this was a great opportunity. And I really remember thinking, I felt like God was saying, hey, we need you to bring your skills here to help make this vision happen.
Yeah.
And so then I began to diagnose, well, what are those skills? Well, what I discovered I really loved was less the business part and more the leadership and the people development and the team development.
Yeah.
And that was kind of that light bulb of oh, I think this is what I actually love doing, is I love building the leaders and building a team that helps make a mission possible. So I brought that to the church space and spent 9 years at that church as functionally executive pastor. spent another couple years as an executive pastor out in California. And then I launched the Foresight Group. And I launched the Foresight Group with a heart to cultivate healthy leaders and thriving teams.
Yeah.
And so that's how I am where I am today is I get to write, speak, talk about, and coach on leadership and organizational culture. And so obviously it comes from a very early passion point of that recognition of where you work and who you work with really matters in being able to bring your gifts and live out your own calling and conviction. And so that's a little nugget of my world.
That was so good. You were talking about foresight and your organization, and I think a lot of young leaders just want to jump to being the CEO.
Sure.
But it was a windy road of highs and lows. And I just want to know one thing. When you say, hey, you were part of like the record industry in Nashville for was there like one artist or band that like your paths crossed and you said, man, I really glad I met that person? Were you like a deep fan of anybody that you actually got to like interact with?
I mean, there's definitely like high respect for. So one of the groups I worked with was DC Talk.
Nice.
And,
amazing.
So again, in the 90s.
My dad would be losing his mind right now.
Right?
Wow,
Right. Yes. So you just dated me, Sarah.
Shade.
I'm sorry.
My grandpa loved that band, Jenni.
Right.
Okay. Well, it's not that bad.
In my defense, I was only 20 years old at that moment.
He was much older when he
However,
was a fan. Okay, Brett? I'm not trying to put Jenni under the bus.
Wow.
I'll take it. But I will say this. So I worked with DZ Talk, and Jesus Freak came out the year that I started working at the record company. So it was just a phenomenal time, like
That's
crazy
so
time to be in the
cool.
music business. Because we were like Christian records were topping the Billboard 100.
Right,
Like that
right.
had never been seen before. So it was a really, really fun era. But I will say Toby Mac, who is still doing music to this day, is like just a phenomenal human. Like it's sometimes hard to say that and see that in people that are in that type of industry. And Toby really is like the genuine, just genuinely has such a heart for the work that he does and is so intentional in how he does it. So just just absolute professional and wonderful human. So that was a big one. Another fun one for me was an artist named Stacey Orico. If you remember Stacey Orico.
Stacey Orico.
So you got to go, Sarah. You got to go. Pull this one up. She had some fun top 40 hits. So she was topping some of the Billboard top charts, and so we got to do some really fun stuff. And she was like a little sister to me. So we still connect from time to time. And but there were a number of others, just really great people. Rebecca St. James was another one that is just a really just great human and a privilege to have worked with.
Hey, we do have to talk about so many other things, though. We could talk about the 90s music for a very long time.
Can I just say...
Are you going to age me?
Can I just say my first job was at a multi-site mega church in Houston, and it was a marriage conference, and they had Stephen Curtis Chapman.
I would lose my mind.
And I sat down, and he was sitting one row directly in front of me, and it took everything in me not to tap him on the shoulder. And no, I mean, I regret it to this day, but I was like, I'm new here. I'm the new guy at this church. I'm going to play it cool.
No,
and,
Brett, you have the opportunity.
But on the inside, I was fangirling so hard because
that's so fantastic.
Diving in is like
that's like your song.
Peak.
That's
like
kind of your theme song.
Like when I get to heaven, I hope that's what's blaring.
That's gonna be your walk-up song.
Yeah.
Stephen Curtis Chapman.
Honestly, that is like the best song ever made.
When the pearly gates open, that's what you
play.
Okay,
that's see. Hey, you know what? You kind of wonder if that's how it'll be. Whatever our favorite is, it's like
it's just gonna be playing.
It's gonna be playing. I mean, who knows?
That's
hilarious. I love that. That's great.
If Hell's Bells is playing, you're in trouble.
Okay, well, we're gonna zigzag a little bit.
Okay, good.
We're gonna talk about your recent book release. We're talking about Culture Matters. What an incredible book that you have written, and I want to hear kind of the story behind it. What inspired you to write it? I know you've got Foresight, which goes pretty hand in hand with a lot of the things that you were talking about in this book, but kind of talk about, Foresight started a while before you wrote this. So talk about what led to finally getting to the point where you were like, you know what? I need to have this in writing and release it. Like, that's a burden on my heart that I feel like I need to do. So tell us a little bit more.
Well, and Sarah, you captured that so well, because it really was a burden of like what I kept finding. And I shared that early experience of like that corporate merger that made me go, what in the world has happened? And then I had, other experiences like that where I would be a part of teams that were really fantastic. And I felt like I was thriving, I was growing, I was being, stretched and challenged, and yet connecting with my team members. And just, we've all had those moments of being a part of a team where you were like, gosh, this is fantastic. And then most of us have had the stories of, I hate this. And it's not even that I hate the work. It's that there's something about the experience, something about the environment that's just draining the life out of me.
Yeah.
And especially for the era that I was in church ministry, directly in church leadership, I thought the church should be the most energizing place to work. Like the privilege to use our gifts inside of the local church for the sake of making the Great Commission possible. I thought, this is such an extraordinary privilege. And I just kept wrestling with these ideas of what makes an environment or a culture great and what makes it not so great. And what I kept finding was that we all know what it looks and feels like when it's great and when it's not great, but none of us knew exactly what to do. Like, so we just kind of hold our breath when it's great and hope that nothing breaks. And then when it's bad, we just try to find the quickest escape hatch.
Yeah.
And so I just kept getting more and more committed. This was with the teams that I was working with, even pre-Foresight, figuring out what does it take to create a great culture? Because it's more than, free pizza and ping pong tables, right? It's like, okay, those things are great.
Yeah,
but
sure. They help.
Like they help, but they're not at the heart of what makes a team great.
Right.
So I just kept rigorously trying to figure this out, in real time with the teams that I was a part of. I tell like some of the teams that I worked with in the years past, I was like, thank you for being the guinea pigs, because you guys were the guinea pigs of all my culture building experiments. And some of them were good and some of them weren't so good. So really the book is this culmination of saying, I've dedicated the last 20 years of my career to trying to figure out how to help people thrive in the teams that they're a part of. And I think there's a really unique opportunity that we have when we're in a leadership position, is to say, hey, we've got this responsibility for the mission of the organization, right? And, whether it's a church or it's a business or whatever context it is, there's this mission that we need to achieve and goals we need to achieve. But then there's this group of people that are here. There's this talent assembled that we need to figure out, how do we steward that? How do we bring the best out of the people that are here helping us achieve the mission? And how do we make sure those two things are happening simultaneously? We're achieving that mission and we're stewarding the talent of the individuals that are here, that we're helping them grow, we're helping them develop, they're giving their best, and we're doing that all to achieve a mission together. So that became the passion for me, is that I think it's possible. I've seen it, I've lived it. And I want every person to have that experience. I just think work should bring some of the best out of us. And that's not always the case. So what I did was say, we give a lot of time and energy to building strategic plans for our organizations. We craft, vision and mission statements, and we spend extraordinary amounts of time doing that. But rarely do we craft a plan for our people, for the culture of our team. And that's actually the linchpin. Like, if our people aren't healthy, if our culture is not strong, we're spinning our wheels towards the mission, right? We've all been there. It's like, we can have this amazing mission and fantastic strategy to achieve it, but if our people, our team isn't aligned towards that, if they're not in a great place, it's quicksand, right?
Right.
So that was the heart of the book, is saying, hey, here's the plan. Like, you need a plan for your people just as much as you need a plan for your strategy. And that's what I wanted to create, was really that, a framework, operating playbook for organizational culture.
So good. I love the heart of this book. It reminds me kind of the heart of our podcast, and there's a lot of intersections of ours is geared towards, millennials and Gen Z starting off their careers, or maybe they're one position into their career and they're going, do I, don't I? Is this the right fit for me? And I love your story of, I was in this space for about a decade, and then I was in this role that was I added tools to my tool belt, but it looked different within the church context. But now I'm ready to launch this thing.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there were questions along the way of, am I ready to launch this thing? I think there's
For sure.
that's a natural piece to that. But man, I think there's just a lot of like for young up and coming leaders. We were talking offline before we started recording of like, this is kind of like you're learning to ride your bike, and these are the kind of the knee pads and the helmets of lessons learned that we have done.
That's right.
And like, hey, maybe if you can avoid this pitfall, I would do it. But here's what we have learned along the way. And so thinking about young individuals that maybe they aren't in like a leadership position yet, like how can that individual play a role in crafting or continuing on a healthy culture in their workspace?
Yeah. Yeah, I love that question. And it's such a key one, because I think a lot of times we just think, well, when I'm in the position of leadership, then I'll be able to influence this.
Right.
But the reality in organizational culture is that every person on the team contributes, right? Like everybody is contributing to whether that's an environment we enjoy being a part of. And so that would be my encouragement to, whatever seat you're in, whatever stage of your career journey you're in, that you are contributing to the culture every day. And so what I would say is asking yourself, how am I contributing, right? Am I contributing positively? Am I contributing negatively? Understanding the organization and what's important to the organization, because this is sometimes where we can allow ourselves to get a little frustrated and maybe the best of us doesn't show up, is if we're in an environment that we actually aren't aligned with. So when I talked about that merger way back in the day, that first, division of the company that I was a part of at the record company was great alignment. Like, just the vision, the mission, the values, the leadership style, like, those ingredients that kind of help shape the experience of a culture, I was aligned with. Like I was thriving in that. When we went through the merger, it was a different place, not because the people were bad, right? Like, so I don't want to give the misunderstanding that, I said my leader and the team had changed. They weren't bad people, but the culture was different. What they valued, how they worked. My definition of culture is clarity of who we are and how we work together to achieve our mission. Well, when you really dig into that and try to put some language to that, those are the distinctives that make this record company different from this record company, or this church different from this church. Like the core mission might be the same,
right?
But the who we are and how we work together, there's nuances, those distinctives about this team, this group of people are different. And so what I discovered is that I just didn't align as well with that group. And I was going to stay frustrated, and I was probably frustrating them by trying to be a part of something that I didn't fully believe in or embrace.
Yep.
And so I was maybe trying to even push an agenda or push, my perspective on a culture that wasn't who they were and how they worked together.
Yeah.
So I think what's really important as a young leader is to recognize, hey, I need to understand this organization. Who are they? How do they work together? What are those beliefs, the values, beliefs, and behaviors that shape this organization? And do I like them? Do I agree with them? Do I align with them? Because if I don't, then I have to ask myself the hard question of, is this a place I can positively be a part of? Because if I'm coming in and working against the values, beliefs, and behaviors of the organization that I'm in, well, then I'm the toxic part of the culture, right?
Jenni, that will preach right there. That is good.
Well, and I think now I realize we don't always have that opportunity of like, well, I'll just go find another job over here somewhere, right?
Sure.
So I think what's important is to understand, I need to understand that I need to do my best to align with it.
Yeah.
And then if I really can't, then I might need to see if there's a better place for me somewhere else. The other thing I would say, because this is more often the case, is that younger leader, team member who's in the organization is saying, we say we value, believe, and behave this way, but we actually don't, right? Like this is the value on the wall. This is what I hear preached, but this is not what I actually see. And that creates a lot of frustration because you're saying, well, I align with what we say, but it's not what we do internally. my encouragement to you is to be the one who does it, right? Because then you're not out of alignment with what they've said they want to be. So then you say, I'm going to be one of the catalysts to actually live into who we say we want to be. I'm going to be a positive part of actually reflecting what we aspire to as an organization. Because every organization has the reality of their culture and who they say they want to be, right? There's always a gap. There's always a gap between where we are and what we say we want to be. And that's why we sometimes roll our eyes at the values on the wall that are not like true in the day to day. So, you know, because you have far more influence than you realize, regardless of the seat you're in. If you start living into those values, that's contagious. Like people are like, well, that's what I want to be a part of.
Right.
And so, you know, influence from the seat you're in would be the very short way to answer the question you asked me.
Okay.
That was good.
If you guys listen to any of this podcast, rewind the past 5 minutes and go re-listen to it, because you just said so many things
that was great.
that I want to talk about and expand upon, which is also why you should read Jenni's book.
Yeah.
But I think one of the biggest things that you were talking about is, and I'm technically a zillennial, right? Like I'm kind of in the in-between of the two.
In-between.
But the
like
hard,
that.
Thank you. The hard part is, you know, we always say, when do you know when it's time to leave? And I think a lot of the time it's, you know, I was changing, this was changing. There are a lot of cases where there is new management, new supervision that comes in. And even though they're living out those values, maybe they're living them out kind of differently. They've kind of shifted some things. And sometimes you have to know it's time for you to go. Yeah. And that's a really hard conversation to have with yourself. But like you said, you don't really want to be the problem. You don't want to be constantly like running into the wall, and you're so frustrated with the employer. But the reality is things have shifted within the company, and that's okay.
That's right.
Like that's allowed to change. And then it may not be the season that you're supposed to be in that company. Maybe you had that time and it's time for you to look for other open doors. Like you said, there's not always that next job you can just quit on a whim and go. But I think pressing into that and asking those questions, like, am I a good fit for this? I was 5 years ago when I started. We've had new management. We've had turnover. I've shifted my role. The company's grown, whatever it may be, and kind of taking a step back and being like, okay, am I serving the culture as well? Not just is the culture serving me. I think that's huge. That's huge.
Well, and I think it's such a part, like I love that you called that out, Sarah, because it's also such a key part of our own growth and development to do that reflection. Like if you see because our tendency, every one of us has done this, is something feels off or we're frustrated inside of our organization, and we want to point the finger and put the blame on leadership somewhere. Like there's somebody, they somewhere are responsible for this.
Yeah.
And they might be, but to your point, like the organization might have made some changes, and that's their prerogative. Like they can make those changes, and then it's on us to go, well, how do I align with that? How do I fit with that? But doing that work is so valuable for your own leadership. So one of my like mantras is lead yourself well to lead others better. The self-leadership piece is one of the greatest things you will do in your growth and development as a human, is to lead yourself well. So that awareness of, why does this feel off? Why am I frustrated? What is it? Like, so that values alignment of like, well, here's what the organization values. Well, here's what I value. Are those aligned or are they not? And if they're not, well, I know a lot more about myself. I know a lot more about what's important to me in living out my calling and using my gifts, etc. So now I go, okay, where's the best place for me to use those gifts? And I can't tell you the number of times I've done this in my own journey where I've been a part of good organizations with good people, but I just recognize, hey, some of the things that are core to this organization might not actually align with my best gifts and contribution.
Yeah.
And then that helps me go, okay, now what do I do about that? Right? Do I look for places where I can align more, or do I say I need to go look for an opportunity to use my gifts more intentionally? So I just wanted to call out that self-leadership piece that you're naming in that, because that's a huge part of our own growth and development.
Right.
And can you share a little bit about, there's such a sacred space before you dive in with Foresight and starting your own organization. You know, can you mention a little bit about when the Lord placed that on your heart for the first time, when he's like, hey, saddle up your horses. You've got a trail to blaze. Whoa.
This is so good.
That was the second, Stephen. I don't know if you know that one.
Sarah,
I don't know.
I caught it. I was tracking with you.
Okay, I think Jenni was
really
tracking.
good.
But
really good.
like when that was first placed on your heart and when you went for it, because I think even young leaders are going, do I have it in me? I have this in my soul, but do I have this in me?
Right.
Oh, I love that you asked that question because it was a journey. So I'll try to describe this quickly, but when I went from the record company to church ministry, that was just a complete upheaval in what I thought I would do and why.
Right.
But the surprises that God just kind of brought to me, that was when opportunities to speak and write came to me. And I say they kind of came to me like it was accidental. I was all of a sudden, I'm a female executive pastor, which was really unusual in the church 15 to 20 years ago. And so then that was hey, let's get her speaking at conferences and doing breakouts because she's a kind of a odd duck, and so I kind of accidentally found myself doing the speaking and writing thing, but then I discovered what a passion I had for it. And the irony was I didn't see myself as a speaker, and yet in my music business days, I did sales presentations as one of my core parts of my job. So I was public speaking all the time. I was just pitching you on the next DC Talkin' Stacey or Rico record, But I had done a lot of public speaking in my job previously. I just didn't consider myself a speaker. And so here was God kind of using and redeeming those skills in a different way that was really life-giving. And so then the writing stuff began. And there was just so much momentum and opportunity from that I was finding a real passion around that. And it was another way that I was investing in leaders, which was another kind of aha moment around some of those passions. So I'm in church ministry, and when I left the church in Nashville, that was the first time that I considered. So at this point, I was writing my third book, and of course, I had been speaking for about a decade. And I'm leaving the church in Nashville, and I was being recruited to a church in California, and so that was on the table. But I was kind of praying and processing through that of was it the right fit, because it meant upheaving my family after 20 years in Nashville to a new community. So lots of stuff to consider.
Yeah.
And that was the moment that I thought, well, should I start my own thing? Should I start my own company and focus on leadership development, speaking, writing, etc.? And so I was praying through that and praying through taking the job in California and processing it with my husband and with some mentors and friends. And I wasn't at peace that it was the time to start Foresight. I didn't have a name for the company at that point, but we weren't at peace that was it. We felt very strongly that I needed to go take the role at the church in California. And so it was in the back of my mind that I'm like, okay, there's something here, but the timing's not right. Yeah. So I went and did another couple of years at the church in California, which is a phenomenal experience, very different church in style and history. And so it was another piece of experience that I needed that I didn't know I needed, right? And so after a couple years there is when I felt like it was finally time to launch Foresight. So to your point, there was probably 10 years of development of the writing and speaking that were happening behind the scenes that were prepping me for launching Foresight. But there was also like a 3-year delay from the first time I really thought about it to when I actually did it. And all of that I feel like I was just getting more pieces of the puzzle that were helping prepare me for launching Foresight.
Yeah. I love that. That's important to hear that was a very much longer journey, and that you even got to a point of maybe now's the time and, prayed into it, thought about it, and were like, not yet.
Not yet. Yeah. And that was really affirmed by people around me, which I think is also really important in that, my husband was a key part of that. Again, some friends and mentors were really in that conversation with me. And that was a key part of discerning that too. Because I think in my ambition, I think I wanted to go launch it. And in hindsight now, I know I would not have been ready. And so those voices around me were really important.
I love it. Kind of pivoting a little bit again, but you've worked with so many leaders, so many different organizations. A question that we get quite often actually is, how do you know when you're interviewing if the
Ooh.
leadership is healthy? How do you know when you're at a job
Such a good
interview
question.
if you're going to align with the culture? Because you really, in a 1-hour interview over Zoom or even in person, it is hard to get a
For
full
sure.
picture of that culture and if you're going to be a good fit. So kind of talk to us a little bit about how you would, with all your experience now, how would you kind of navigate that?
Such a great question and really important because, frankly, even for as much as I live and breathe this stuff, it's easy to miss. It's easy to miss things, right? It's easy to assume the best, especially if you're considering taking a job. Most of us are so excited about the new opportunity because we love new,
Right.
We love that somebody wants us or, so you have to kind of, in fact, I kind of always coach myself to put that healthy skeptical eye on it to go, okay, what am I not seeing? What do I need so to answer your question, obvious things like mission, vision, values, asking those questions, and getting that information. But then, as to the best of your ability, in the interview, you might be able to say, hey, I love your value of, committing to candor. Can you give me an example of what that looks like in the organization every day? Example of you guys doing that this week. How does that play out? Well, that's going to tell you whether they actually do it or not, right?
Yeah.
I love your value of working hard and resting well or whatever,
Oh, yeah.
Well, tell me what that looks like, how do you guys live that out? So you're asking questions that help showcase behavior aligned with those values. So understand their values, understand, who they are and how they work together, try to get them to describe that to you, and then ask for, I'd love to know what that looks like. Give me an example of that.
Right.
So, and you're probably going to, in an interview, you're probably going to get decent answers from whoever is interviewing you.
Yeah.
But if you can, maybe you're with a peer group for a lunch or something as part of the interview process, then, asking, hey, tell me about how you guys live out this value of da-da-da. Or just looking to see if you see it in action or if you see something that's that is in contradiction to what they say. So you're looking for it in behavior and just in the adjacent connections, not in the direct interviews, is where I would be looking for it. And not that you're trying to be this hyper skeptic who's on a witch hunt, right? It's not that. It's just saying, hey, just in the everyday interactions, what do I notice about how they operate? You know? So that's really big. And if you can find somebody who has been at the organization before, or somebody who maybe works with that organization, it's always helpful to just say, hey, can you, I'm talking to this organization. I'd love to hear from you what you loved about them. So you're, again, not on a witch hunt, but you're just asking people that are adjacent to the organization to tell you what they see. So it's looking around the edges, not just directly in the interviews, but in the other interactions for do you see consistency or inconsistency? That's what I would pay attention to.
Right. That's good.
Yeah, you're listening for those echoes, right? And you go, oh,
that's good.
That sounds different, and your ears go up a little bit.
Yeah, that's right.
So I think that's really helpful. And a portion of your book, you're talking about culture teams. I think I'm seeing a growth of that over the last 10 plus years. That might be foreign to some people. Can you share a little bit? Maybe it's people leading an organization and they go, what the heck is a culture team? Could you share a little bit more about that? Because we have one of those at Vanderbloemen, and I think it's so helpful.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So the spirit of that is we want organizations to be intentional about culture and shaping an environment and culture that is consistent with who they are and how they work together. And we're creating an environment where our employees are thriving. Yeah. But if that is just the executive team, it typically falls flat, right? So if it's just the executive leadership, and I love executive leadership, I am one of those. But because what I often will tell senior leaders is your culture is not as good as you think it is. Like, you just need to start from that baseline. If you're in a senior leadership seat, the culture for the rest of the team is not as good as you think it is, because what we experience in the upper levels of the organization is often different from what the team members throughout the organization experience. And we just need to start with that premise. I hope that I'm wrong about that, but so far I'm right about it.
Yeah.
So we start with that premise of, even for our best intentions, it's still easy for us to miss things as senior leaders. So you want to build a culture team that is reflective of team members from throughout the organization. People that are in different roles in seats, so I want admins in there. I do want a senior leader in there. I do want, the somebody from the grounds team. I want somebody from the finance team. I want, so people from throughout the organization. I want people who have been there 60 days, and I want people who've been there 10 years, right? Because I want different perspectives from, and I actually kind of outline how to choose your culture team in one of the chapters of the book.
Super helpful.
I want you to get this diverse perspective, because then that team is around the table saying, are we being congruent with who we are and how we work together? So we create a definition of the culture we aspire to. This is what we look like at our best. This is who we want to be. And we paint that picture. Again, in the book, I give you lots of instructions and insight for how to define your culture. And then your culture team becomes the protector of that. They become the ones saying, okay, how are we doing? What do we need? How do we close the gap on where we are and where we want to be? And they're helping build the plan and take action around that culture. And because they're sitting around the organization in various seats, they're bringing different perspectives that help us know, hey, you know what? Over here, the culture is pretty healthy, but over here, it's like they're really struggling. Now, why is that? What is pressing on the culture there, or what's creating such a disparity on this side of the organization from this side of the organization? So I love the culture team to be a very diverse reflection of the organization, because that's where we're going to get the best and healthiest ongoing assessment of our culture, so that we know where to focus, and they're helping instigate what we need to do to help create a healthy culture.
Yeah, I love that. I think that that's such a small big win. Like, I think that that's a small kind of investment in a company, that can create a giant wave of wins for the company, because no matter where you are in the level of leadership, it really makes you feel valued to have your company purposely create a team that wants you to thrive there, that wants you to feel seen there, that wants to make sure that you're invested in the culture and the culture is invested back in you, like that kind of deposit going back and forth. We've talked a lot about this, but I just kind of want to ask this question specifically. There are some people listening right now that are in a workplace that they would deem as unhealthy or toxic or those types of things. What is your advice for them as they're sitting in that wrestling of, do I leave? Do I stay? What would you tell them?
Such a great question. And I think every situation is going to be a little unique. And for some people that might be it's time for me to move on. For some people it might be but I think I'm here to help influence this positively, right? Right. And so I think you have to evaluate, again, what has caused our culture to be in a tough spot, right? Like what's, is it an outside force? Is it some changes? Is it, the evaluation of leadership of like, hey, has our leader just gone through a hard season, or is our leader really just in an unhealthy place and I don't see trajectory in the right direction, right? So you've got to kind of look at, because there's no perfect leader, there's no perfect team. We're a bunch of messy humans trying to do good work. Right. And so it's that evaluation of, are we in just a hard season, or is this our trajectory, right? Yeah. And then how much influence do I have on that, right? Am I here to help? In some cases, you might be leading a team or a division and you're bringing a lot of stability and health to that team. And is that your calling right now? Maybe you are kind of in the in-between where you're trying to provide leadership and direction to the team that you have responsibility for. And you're kind of a buffer between maybe some areas of the organization that are unhealthy. And can you do that and it not overly impact your health as a leader. You've got to
Right.
evaluate that. And can you influence up? Do you have some voice in,
Yeah.
just bringing awareness to what's not healthy in the organization? If that's just a stonewall, if it's like there's no interest in doing things differently, or they don't agree on your definition of health, then I think I would just start praying and processing through, is this a time for me to move on?
Yeah.
So I really think it's an individual thing of, you're looking at that, the circumstances that have created the unhealth, and what direction are they going in, right? Is it there's a interest and a desire to recover and move to health, and can I be a positive part of that?
Yeah.
Or is there just a lack of awareness or a lack of even agreement on what that looks like? And then that's probably a place where I would say it may be time to move on, and I'd be processing and praying through that.
And this is our world famous landing the plane question for you, Jenni. Okay, so drum roll, please. No, we're not going to do drum roll. But really, we love getting the insight from people that have grown in their work. We've talked a lot about elements that you have learned over the years of your career and in your ministry. And so, what does Jenni know now that you wish Jenni would have known when she was 20?
Ooh, so good. In a simple statement, I would say that people are the point.
Sure.
So I am a very driven, ambitious leader. I like to get stuff done. I like to accomplish great things. And the young version of me thought that the goals and the mission and the achievements were the point. The realization was that the great gift of leadership is doing good work with people.
Yeah.
Leadership, by definition, John Maxwell would say leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. And that word influence means the power to change or affect someone. And when I first bumped into that definition, I was in my mid-20s. I had kind of created a train wreck in my team. I was kind of bulldozing a lot of people because of my ambition. And I had a leader say to me, Jenni, if you want to work with people, you're going to have to learn to love them, to lead them. And then I dug into that word leadership, and it meant influence. And then influence means the power to change or affect someone.
Yeah.
And that just stopped me in my tracks, because I could reflect on the people who had positively changed and affected my life and my story, and the people who had negatively changed and affected my story.
Right.
And I began to think about the people in my sphere of influence. And I was a young leader. I'm in my mid-20s. I didn't have a lot of leadership experience yet, but I could look back and I could see more people that I was negatively affecting than I was positively affecting. And I thought, leadership is such sacred work that and leadership, again, is influence. So it doesn't mean a position of leadership. It means this recognition that every one of us has influence with the people around us, whether it's coworkers, the leaders above us, the leaders around us. We have influence with the people that we work with day in and day out. And there's a sacred privilege to that opportunity. And so when we embrace that and we realize, gosh, the greatest joy is actually working with and working through others, it changes your whole perspective, right?
Yeah.
That leadership is really this sacred privilege, and working with people is really the point, and it's the greatest joy of our work at the end of the day. And so that's what I wish I had known a lot sooner in my leadership journey.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so good. That's so good. Well, Jenni, thank you so much for taking the time. And honestly, thank you so much for writing this book. Thank you for your obedience to take the time. And I know writing a book is no joke. It's a lot of work. And so we're really appreciative. I know wherever you're listening from, wherever you are in an organization, bottom or the exec, this book is very influential and can be super helpful. So thank you for writing it. Thank you for talking about it and coming on our podcast. We really appreciate it.
Thank you guys so much for having me, and thanks for being just a champion of equipping leaders and serving leaders well. Love it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of A Higher Purpose, a Vanderbloemen podcast. I loved our conversation with Jenni. There is so much to gain from reading her book and listening to this episode, so be sure to check her out. If you want to find us and listen to our other episodes, you can go to ahigherpurposepodcast.com, as well as find us on any of our socials at A Higher Purpose Podcast. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.